Queen's touching new tribute to her husband. In a post online, the royal family reiterated the Queen's description of the Duke as her strength and stay. This morning, their sons came to Windsor to support her as the Countess of Wessex told the crowd the Queen's been amazing. We're live at Buckingham Palace, where the crowds are building too, despite a request for well-wishers not to congregate because of COVID. Also ahead, the gun salute to say goodbye to the Duke. The first ceremonial tributes took place at cities across the UK and at sea.
It's wonderful that, nationally we are now remembering a wonderful man.
Has Harry left LA? The latest on who could be at the funeral and the plans for it. And the Duke's main legacy, will it be the work of the scheme in his name to help young people?
This is ITV News with Nina Hossain from Buckingham Palace.
Good afternoon from Buckingham Palace as the country pays its first official ceremonial tributes to the Duke of Edinburgh. Gun salutes rang out across the UK at midday and also at sea to reflect the Duke's naval past. There were more personal tributes too. The Queen shared a photograph of them together with the words, "I, his whole family, this and many other countries owe him a debt greater than he would ever claim or we shall ever know." Their sons, Prince Andrew and Prince Edward, arrived at Windsor Castle this morning to add their support. Sophie Wessex told the crowd, the Queen has been amazing. In the first of our reports, here's our correspondent Romilly Weeks on the royal salutes.
Through the mists of the early morning at Windsor, home now to a Queen in mourning, the household cavalry were the first of the military today to pay their respects to the Duke, stopping their horses to salute. While the Queen, in her first message since the announcement of her husband's death, made clear the depth of her loss. These words posted on social media: "He has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years, and I and his whole family and this and many other countries owe him a debt greater than he would ever claim, or we shall ever know." An extract from the speech she made at the couple's golden wedding. The Queen's family are gathering round. Prince Andrew and the Earl and Countess of Wessex have joined Prince Charles in visiting the monarch. The Countess of Wessex told onlookers afterwards the Queen had been amazing. From across the seas and here at home, the military paid tribute to one of their own. In Woolwich, the guns now marking mourning for the Duke had also marked the joy of his marriage and the Queen's coronation. In castles across the nation's capitals, the same solemn ceremonial. The public might not have been permitted to watch, but they could certainly hear. For the Navy, a goodbye to the man who was much more than a ceremonial figurehead.
His generous spirit, his delight in all aspects of the naval service, and his deep understanding of our values, standards and ethos made him such a close friend to the service for over 8 decades. And he will really be deeply missed by all of us.
Prince Philip, always a keen sailor, had joined the Royal Navy aged just 17. He saw active service during the Second World War, and few doubted that he could have risen to the very top had he not chosen a life of service to the Queen.
It's wonderful that, nationally we are now remembering a wonderful man, and we're doing this today around the country. Here in Portsmouth it's very special because, of course, this was the senior naval base. Where we're standing at the moment was where Britannia was decommissioned, and the memories are so special for us all to remember such a wonderful man today.
The Queen's sad task now is to agree the final funeral plans for the Duke. It will be a simplified, scaled-back service in St George's Chapel, Windsor. Hard for those who were mourning him, perhaps, but not very far from what the man who so disliked a fuss wanted. Romilly Weeks, ITV News.
Neil Connery has spent the morning at Windsor Castle. Neil, the Queen has been supported by her sons a little earlier.
Yes, we saw the Earl and the Countess of Wessex here at Windsor. They were here for around 90 minutes or so before leaving at about 1:45. We saw them wave at some of the well-wishers who've been growing in numbers here this morning. We also saw that the Countess understandably looked emotional but managed to smile, and she was asked how the Queen was coping with everything that had happened. She appeared to say amazing in response to that. As I say, more well-wishers here today actually than they were yesterday. Those appeals from the royal household for people not to come here, and from the Cabinet Office, I'm not sure they're being heeded in the way that they'd hoped that message was. I think it's understandable. People want to show their respects and pay their respects to the Duke of Edinburgh, but given the pandemic situation we are in, I think they might need to rethink all of this in the days ahead here.
Neil Connery, thank you. Our royal editor Chris Shipp joins me now. The royal family really rallying around the Queen, as you'd expect, and she will need their support right now, understandably.
Yeah, of course she will. And actually, when you think that we'd had Prince Charles, who came and visited yesterday, he drove from Highgrove to see his grieving mother at Windsor. Today we've had her youngest son, Prince Edward, and Sophie there as well, and they will be rallying around their mother. Why? Because she's woken up this morning to the realisation of the dreadful news that was announced yesterday of the loss of her husband. The pictures you're seeing here was their 73rd and final wedding anniversary. They spent it together at Windsor Castle, where they have been for the past year, spent a lot of that time together, and she will need her family around her, as anyone will at this time. But as lots of people in this country have experienced, I think it's always worth us pointing this out, this has been a difficult year for so many people. The Queen is now coming to terms with the loss of the man that's been by her side since 1947, but they will have to do this just as every other family's had to do this year, by remaining compliant with the government restrictions that remain in place. And that's why a lot of the work that's going on, not just with the immediate staff that's around the Queen at Windsor Castle, but the staff that are working in here at Buckingham Palace, is to work out now the funeral arrangements, what happens, how it happens, and of course when it happens.
Yeah, what's the latest on that? The crowds are building, we should point out here, as we've been here as the morning has progressed, despite those warnings about not congregating here. But what's the latest you're hearing on when we will know more about what this funeral will look like?
I'm pretty confident that we'll have something to say by late afternoon, early evening this evening about the funeral. That's likely to be there for the day. My hunch would be that there's either going to be something like Friday or Saturday of next week, so in a week's time, or if they can't get all the things in place by then, it will be the following Monday. So that's the kind of timescale we're looking at the moment. But of course, everything that's been in place for so many years for the Duke of Edinburgh for this exact moment has to been hastily revised in order to be compliant. And in some respects, people have said, look, he didn't want a fuss, he didn't want a state funeral, he didn't want to lie in state and all the rest of it. So in some respects, the revision, the scaling down of these funeral plans will be kind of what he would have wanted.
And we should know a little later on. Chris, for now, thank you. Our correspondents have been following the events so far today at Woolwich Barracks in London and in Edinburgh. First to Rachel Younger in Woolwich. Some significance in the guns that were used there at midday.
Yes, that's right. 13-pounders, 6 of them all saw service in the First and Second World War. But they're also the very same guns that were fired at the wedding of the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh back in 1947, and then again a few years later at the Queen's coronation. Then, of course, they were fired in celebration. Today was a very different occasion, and it was one that was marked and shaped by the pandemic, because this troop, the very closest to the royal household, would normally have fired their guns from Hyde Park, right in earshot Buckingham Palace, and there would have been crowds lining every pathway. Instead, they came here to Woolwich Barracks, where they have their horses stabled and where many of the guns were, of course, forged many, many years ago. And the battery was held here. There were crowds lining the fences here to see the firing of the salute from a unit that was set up by the Queen's father back in 1946, named after him, today saying a final farewell to her late husband.
And this is the city, of course, from which the Duke took his title. He became the Duke of Edinburgh on his wedding day in 1947, the title given to him by his father-in-law, the then King George VI. He gave a lot of service to this city and took his duties very seriously. He was the Chancellor of Edinburgh University from 1953. And it's also fitting that on top of Edinburgh Castle, overlooking the city from which he took his title, it was the Royal Regiment of Artillery who were giving the gun salute. Let me start by telling you about the 105 Regiment Royal Artillery, a regiment of reservists, all reservists, including people who have been working in the NHS over the last year, fighting the pandemic, people who are teachers here we've been speaking to. They've been over the last year juggling their service to their community and today stepping up, serving their country. Fitting for the Duke, a man, of course, who spent his life serving his country and serving his Queen. And this Royal Regiment of Artillery, their honorary Captain General is, of course, Queen Elizabeth herself.
Peter Smith and Rachel Younger, thank you. People have been paying their respects at royal palaces across the country. Uppermost in the thoughts of many was the Queen and how she must be feeling at this very difficult time, as Richard Pallow now reports.
A moment to reflect became almost too much for one man this morning. His kiss for the gate at Sandringham, the royal residence which Prince Philip had made his permanent home after retiring from public life. Among the many tributes in Norfolk, one from a chef, Nino, who cooked for him at a banquet here 4 years ago.
I actually met him and the Queen when I'd done the cooking. We had venison on that day from the royal estate, so he said to us, that must have been some stag, and I had a big chef beside me. I said, he is, but he done quite well with his cooking. So I had a good laugh, and then it's just a mark of respect. I felt it was worth coming down and paying some respect.
Officials are urging the public not to leave flowers or visit the various castles and palaces because of the pandemic. But throughout the morning, small groups have continued to gather.
It's very sad to lose a loved one, and although she's the Queen and it's the royal family, loss doesn't hurt any less, regardless of where you're at in life. So yeah, I think it's just important for us to pay our respects today and to just remember the Duke.
Yeah, I share in the loss of the royal family, and to me it felt as if I lost my dad today. So that's how strongly I felt about it. Yeah.
At Buckingham Palace, bouquets laid yesterday were removed at first light to prevent people stopping en masse to read the messages. With guards watching on, more have now been placed. One by Brenda Montague, who knew him from working at the National Maritime Museum in London.
Sometimes he comes to the museum without any bodyguards. He kind of dressed on the cover. Yes, but we all know him, and he always sneak out.
Back at Sandringham, a Merchant Navy veteran who used to carry the standard at Royal Church services stood instead for the duration of the gun salute. His poignant way to mark the Duke's death. Richard Pallow, ITV News.
Let's go live to Ben Chapman at the Sandringham estate, where people have been leaving their own tributes. Ben, what's been happening so far today?
Well, no big crowds here. We are in rural Norfolk, but nevertheless a slow and steady stream of people coming to these gates to pay their respects today. And not surprising, given the long-standing and close connection and affection between the royal family and this community. This is where the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh had come almost every Christmas for the last few decades. And when they did, they would be met by local people wishing them well on Christmas Day on the way into church. And Prince Philip was often seen chatting and laughing with many of those people. And so quite a few of the people who've come here today to leave flowers had actually met the Duke, and they told me of his warmth, his sense of humour, of his ability to use a joke or a cheeky aside to put people at ease on what otherwise might have been a daunting occasion. This is where he chose to come to spend his final years after retiring from public life. He was able to do so in private and in seclusion. He loved Sandringham, and what's clear today is that the people of Sandringham also loved him.
Ben Chapman, thank you. Well, as Chris was saying, we are expecting to have more details on the Duke's funeral later today, and it's thought Prince Harry will be flying to the UK, back to the UK for that. Our US correspondent Emma Murphy joins us from Los Angeles, where Harry and Meghan now live. What's the latest you are hearing, Emma?
Well, we understand that steps are in place now for Harry to return to the United Kingdom as soon as possible. When he moved out here to these hills outside Santa Barbara, he must have contemplated with two elderly grandparents that this terribly difficult journey would come potentially sooner rather than later. But I think he could have been forgiven for underestimating just how difficult this journey will be, partly because he was travelling out here when there was not a global pandemic underway. His return to the UK will be with terrible restrictions on travel back into the UK. He'll need to take a COVID test before he leaves the US. He will then have to isolate for 10 days with the option to release after 5 if he has a negative test. There are various ways around these regulations, still staying within them. He could potentially isolate alone and then go to the funeral and leave. That would be one option, or there may be some kind of diplomatic protocol that is open to him. But of course, there is then the personal challenge that he faces, travelling in grief without the chance to say farewell. We understand the last time he saw his grandfather was back in 2019 when he introduced his young son Archie to the family all those months ago. But also since then we have had that interview with Oprah Winfrey, that airing of grievances that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex felt that they had towards the royal family. They have not been in personal touch with them face to face since. There have been phone calls, but this will be their first opportunity to meet. And we understand that the most likely scenario is that Harry will travel back alone. Meghan will stay here with Archie.
All right, Emma Murphy, such complex times. Thank you very much. Thank you. Back here, politics is on a pause in this period of mourning. Campaigning for any upcoming local elections next month will stop. For more on that, our political reporter Shihab Khan joins me now from Downing Street. So campaigning on a pause, but Parliament will come back early from the Easter break on Monday to pay tribute to the Duke.
Yes, at the moment here in Westminster there is a parliamentary recess. They'll be back on Monday from 2:30 where there'll be a special session so that MPs can pay tribute. We're expecting the Prime Minister to participate with that, and there'll be plenty of MPs across the United Kingdom who will be keen to do so. We're about to enter what will be a quiet period for government until the funeral. While we're in mourning, there won't be any major policy announcements. Ministers won't be doing interviews on the radio or on the television, and we're not expecting one of those coronavirus press conferences. What we will see is if there is any need for it, but any public health messaging from the government, because we are of course still in the midst of the pandemic, but it is going to be ultimately a quiet period, and like you said, all campaigning has also been suspended for this period of time.
Shihab Khan, thank you. The Duke met countless members of the public over the years. Some have been remembering those meetings online today. Tim Goodwin tweeted this picture from 2007 saying, "I was an unshaven student with a scraggy beard. He asked what I wanted to do after graduation. I said I was considering a career in the Royal Navy. He squinted at me and said sternly, 'You're going to have to learn to grow a better beard than that.'" David Luck remembered meeting the Duke in 1972 when he was just 9. That's him on the left and me on the right. He just asked us if we were going to challenge the Ramsey lifeboat crew to a fight. Linda Winbank offered her condolences to the Queen, and she also said, "I may look scared, but I met Prince Philip twice in my life, once in London whilst at catering college, the other whilst serving in the RAF." Nicola Wood met him in 1993. She says, "I was receiving my D.V. Gold Award almost 30 years to the day that my mum got hers. He spoke to everyone in the room, but he had the longest chat with mum." And it is the Duke of Edinburgh's award which could prove to be his most enduring legacy. Millions of young people have already taken part across the world. Joining me now is Baroness Tanni Gray-Thompson, a trustee of the award, and Luke Levine, who was helped personally whilst taking the Gold Award. Welcome both. Thank you for joining us today. Luke, how were you helped?
So when I was taking part in the Duke of Edinburgh's Awards, I had actually started my transition from female to male as a transgender person. and the awards actually really helped me through that. The organisation I was doing it with were amazing and so supportive, and made sure that the awards remained accessible to me. As well as that, it kind of inspired my love of the outdoors and of hiking and of everything to do with helping young people and social action.
Luke, that's incredible to hear that it helps somebody not just in terms of their career but in terms of their entire life as well. Baroness, the award will presumably and hopefully live on long after the Duke's death.
It will. I mean, it's 65 years, and if we're starting with a blank piece of paper, all the things it gives are the things you want from young people: building resilience, decision making, challenge. And it's been incredible to see in the last sort of day and a half just how much the award has meant to people. You know, just under 7 million young people in the UK at any one time. 490,000 young people are taking part in the award. So you know, it's a tough time, but it shows how much difference it will make to young people's lives to carry on doing it.
Luke, what would you say to anybody watching this who has thought, well, the Duke of Edinburgh Award, it's not for me, I'm not doing very well at school, this is for those children who want to go on to the best universities in the country? What would you say to them?
I would say that 100% you should do it regardless of if you think all those things, because D.A.V. isn't just about kind of how you're doing in school and other stuff like that. It teaches you leadership, it teaches you independence. It's an amazing opportunity to really get out there and figure out who you are in terms of whilst you are doing that. It is just an incredible thing. As well as that, it really inspires social action and helping the community and getting involved in other activities as well, such as physical activities and learning new skills. There are so many different things that you can do with the award that they don't teach you in school, and it was incredible to me in my life.
Absolutely. Tanny, you know, it's built on resilience and exercise and public service, a very military focus, lessons we could all live by, especially in such difficult times of the pandemic.
Well, I think young people with, you know, their experience of COVID, which has been, you know, horrible on so many levels, the award is more relevant than it's ever been, with GCSEs and A-levels being cancelled, young people making big decisions about their future. The award is that constant in their lives. And we now have a memorial page on the D.A.V. website, and there are some incredible stories coming through there from not just young people who are doing it now, but from the whole history of the awards. And, you know, we hope it continues.
OK, Baroness Tanny Gray-Thompson and Luke Levine, thank you both for joining me and for your reflections on what the scheme means to so many people. Sporting stars are paying their respects to the Duke of Edinburgh this weekend. At the Etihad Stadium, Manchester City and Leeds United players stood for a 2-minute silence ahead of the lunchtime kick-off just over an hour ago. And at Aintree, where the Grand National takes place later this afternoon, a 2-minute silence will be held. ITV sport presenter Ed Chamberlain is there.
Yes, there was a very sombre feel to Aintree yesterday. It'll be a similar story today as racing pays its respects to the Duke of Edinburgh. Black armbands will be worn by the jockeys, the flags again will be flying at half-mast, and like yesterday there will be a 2-minute silence which will be immaculately observed. He wasn't directly necessarily associated with racing, but we always saw Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, at Royal Ascot every year alongside Her Majesty the Queen, and he was a giant in the equestrian world. Loved horses, and amazing pictures I've seen of him with the horses at Santa Anita at the 1984 Olympic Games. That was his real passion, and he was a brilliant carriage driver. So we'll pay our respects today to Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, here at Aintree.
Ed Chamberlain reporting there. Let's get a final thought from our royal editor Chris Shipp. The royals pulling together. We're here at Buckingham Palace, but the main focus as the days go on will be at Windsor Castle, where the Queen is.
Yeah, we've been here all morning, and the road around the Queen Victoria Memorial here is often shut at the weekend, and there's a kind of, isn't there, like a sombre atmosphere here, a respectful atmosphere, I would say, and no laying of flowers, you know, in mass numbers, because people have been asked not to do so. But yes, a lot of the thought now is going towards exactly what happens with the funeral, and some consideration is being given to how close members of the family pay their own tributes. Now, that could be the Queen, it could be the Prince of Wales, and you know, remember the Queen gave a televised address before her mother's funeral. She gave one before Princess Diana's funeral. So I wouldn't rule that out. We're still waiting for the day of the actual funeral itself. But I think the family will now be wondering how they can let the nation know what the Duke of Edinburgh meant to them and what he did for the Queen and for this country.
And of course, in this situation, for the first time, they haven't got the Duke of Edinburgh to advise them on how to handle these next few steps. Chris Shipp, thank you very much. Thank you. Buckingham Palace, like Windsor, a focal point from this for this significant moment in the history of the royal family and the country. From everyone here, for now, bye-bye.
Apologies, we'll be back with you in just a moment. We're having a few technical difficulties. We'll be back with you in just a moment.